So this week we are going to make birds. And the plan is that we'll make birds. Next week we'll do furry animals. And then the 2 weeks after that, we can choose what we want. My plan is to do insects and reptiles because there's a lot you can do with them. But feel that people have reservations about insects, and I myself cannot draw lizards as much as I would like. I can draw like Komodo dragons, but not lizards. So if you have any reservations, please let me know. I can always look for something else. There was somebody who would not come into my studio until I had removed a pencil sketch of a snake. She just said that when I come into the space, I just feel like that snake is, it was a pencil sketch, and actually I should feel flattered. It looks so realistic. But she said, I just hate snakes. I can't explain it, and I'm very sorry. So I had to remove that frame every time she came. So that's why with reptiles and insects, I can give you a choice. But if not, then that is the plan, and it's very lovely. I love doing these topics. So for today, I have shared pictures of some a variety of birds. So this one I have chosen close up because there's so much happening on the face. The others, this is a regular bulbul. We'll see it a lot in India. This one, I don't know what the bird is, but I chose it for its very distinctive coloring and also a particular pose that we are going to practice. This one, I think I knew the name of this bird. I made this picture before, but I can't remember it. Again, this is for different poses. So we are going to start with making pencil sketches of these, some loose, some details, and try to fill in some textures to get an idea of proportion. After that, we will choose any one of these sketches or one of these birds to make a watercolor illustration. So now we have to pack all of this in the 90 minutes of class that we have, which means that the first maybe 20 to 30 minutes are all that we have for that pencil sketching that we're going to do of all four, which means that throw your erasers out. You don't need them. If you keep erasing them, I can guarantee all 90 minutes are going to go in the sketching of the birds, and we don't want that. So I'm going to show you a way of sketching that will make it a little easier for you if you're not very comfortable making long lines. So we sometimes have an assumption in our head about how artistic lines have to be drawn. Sometimes you've seen some artists work a certain way. Sometimes it's just something that we possess as a romantic notion. So I want to give you a couple of techniques um, to practice over time so that you can start building a strong hand for sketching. If your sketching hand is strong, everything else will come very easy. So 50-60% of your art practice is just developing a good, strong sketching line. And the remaining 40 or 50% is color composition, application of color, understanding consistency, watercolor painting. All of that for all the mediums falls under the remaining 40 or 50% of art that you do. So in this month, we will do a lot of pencil sketching before we go to the final artwork. So there's two ways with which we can sketch. One is to draw long flowing lines. I'll show you that as well. And the other one is to draw very short, straight lines and create blocks to represent everything that you are going to make. This second technique is a lot easier to build on. First, you start making those blocks and then those flowing lines come. So I'm going to demonstrate the difference between the two. And I want you to try both of them. Don't reject any technique just because you may not know how to do it right now. You need to be aware and you need to know where you are most comfortable and most skilled. So I'm going to first start drawing the parrot. And I'm going to make these 4 sketches. Oh, this page is damaged. I'm using another one. I'm making these 4 sketches in a small size, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are just studies, so they don't have to be the whole page. So one way to sketch is to draw these kind of shapes. You have seen me do this before. It's not new, but I want to show you this technique in contrast to the next technique. So this is, don't draw anything, just observe. You start off with shapes like these, and then you start building these. We might also start making, these grids, an internal grid. So this technique works. And while I'm drawing this, I want you to know that my hand is moving while my eye is looking at the reference image. So even though my hand moves, my eye is on the reference image. And then I can do some shading like this and build texture. This is one way. I'll make the eye later because I want to demonstrate something there. So the multiple lines over here will keep giving you some indication of size and shape and proportion. Right? Now the second technique, I'm going to show you the bulbul. It comes in handy when you have to make something like this. I'm going to break the bulbul up into a grid, which will be the head as a circle. And then from here, some kind of a teardrop shape. I can make it like this, or I can make it in short lines like this. So with each part of the bulbul, I just look at that part and I look at what kind of line you get at a tangent and just make that. This is where the wings end. So this is almost like if you can visualize creating a block of wood, and then from which you have to then carve out the details. This is how it would look. A straight line here, a straight line there. Everything is built in straightish lines. So this technique becomes slightly easier because we are used to making short span straight lines rather than these smooth lines. And often the short lines can bring us closer to a rough sketch better, depending upon what we are making, than the smooth lines like parrot. And once I know the proportions made by these lines, I can then furnish further details as I see them. And I'll see them through these lines. So what I want you to avoid making are these kinds of lines. This is not what I mean you should be doing. These are not good lines. you can make longer lines, but not as long as these. So I would make the throat of the bulbul like this. I would make it this long because this appears to be going straight. At this point, it goes inward a little bit, then it turns inward a little bit. And then I just make these fence lines for its the bottom. All right. So this is the difference between the sketches. Now to give you a proportion, before you start sketching, always look for some internal proportion in the in whatever we are making. So here's what I look for. I find a shape that I can recognize in the face. It could be like this. I'll make this one and then I'll make the next one also. Just divide it in half vertically and horizontally. This is just an objective grid. And then from here you start getting cues. This is again dividing the horizontal into quarters and the vertical into quarters. So it gives you some starting point and all the other measurements like everything else. This is one option. You could try another one where you incorporate even the beak. And then do the same thing again. You could also make a grid like this. This is an internal grid. So you still have a center line. Then you divide the center line into, say, 3 parts. From the bottom half, you draw a line at so and so angle. So you can come up with your own grid, but something that you can see clearly. Okay, I'm going to share those 2 images and I want you to try sketching this bird according to whichever technique and whichever grid you find comfortable. And then use that same technique for the other birds as well. Okay, now you can all begin. In order to avoid using the eraser, use the pencil very lightly. So in this case, when you're sketching, in both cases, it's important that you draw the line a certain way. Since we are drawing feathers, make your line wispy, which means that you shouldn't be able to tell where the start of the line is and where the end of the line is. So it's almost like a pendulum, as opposed to drawing lines that are very firm. These lines become too firm. So you need to draw lines which are just like this. Now for the eye, it's really important to draw the eye alive. So you could goof up in a whole lot of stuff, but if you goof up the eye, then all other mistakes stand out. So here we have a cream colored eye with a pupil which has got a highlight. First, seek out the highlight and make that. Then within the pupil or within the lens also, you've got a dark center and then you've got a gray outline to that. I goofed up the outer shape, but it's still not as bad. There. So that highlight makes all the difference. You could make an eye, a realistic eye, and even put it on inanimate objects. And yet, because of how well you have illustrated it, that inanimate object could look alive. And you could draw a beautiful bird with all the details, and yet if your eye is beady, then even that bird tends to look very artificial. So this is because we connect with a lot of species with their eye. The reason why some people have this aversion to snakes or reptiles is because their eyes are they don't have the white of the eye. So it is believed that evolutionarily we have been designed to repel certain creatures just because they are usually unsafe for us. Oh. So I'm using a combination of my 2B pencil and also this clutch pencil, so that in places where the lines are really thin, I can go in to much more detail than with the clutch, with the regular pencil. But in no more detail than I would have been able to do if I just sharpened my pencil. So I'm basically just being a little lazy. Even the clutch pencil is a 2B lead. So I have mentioned this before also in class, but you can look for a specialized 2B lead in stationery stores. Now, when you're drawing these feathers, practice drawing the feathers with the same wispy lines instead of making one zigzag silhouette of the head. Use no more than about 5 minutes per birder. So with the eye, also notice that each eye has a different shape. They're not all just the same oval. if you look at the eye from one angle, it looks like an oval that is flat. From another angle, it looks like an oval that is upright. And that all depends on the angle at which the bird is looking ahead, or it has been captured in the photograph. When you're making the tail, you can just end with the basic shape of the tail feathers, and you don't really need to spend time in shading. Okay, moving along to the next bird, the bottom. Excuse me. Yeah. So with birds, the shape and proportion of the beak and the eye is very important. So this is one step closer to drawing human faces. You may not be able to recognize every individual bird, but definitely you can tell species apart by their the proportions of their beaks. So in order to become good at assessing these proportions, we have to go through a process of, uh, I guess, trial and error in a sense. So I want you to put down that shape and shade the peak completely. Don't second guess yourself before you finish the artwork. And after you're done, you will know what might have been better. And I want you to also contemplate whether, had you erased, would you have arrived at that very solution? Or would you have, had you thought of making the line elsewhere? You have to be brutally honest with yourself. I have found in the past, well, this past was in 1989. After that, I have realized that we can fool ourselves very easily, thinking, no, my if I had gotten an eraser, it would have been better. Not in all circumstances. I realized that I was erasing and making the line in the same place that I had erased because my brain was telling me that that was better. But then when I started doing uh, almost like a post, I wouldn't want to say mortem, but post illustration um, exercise, I realized that I could make corrections on the finished illustration much better and more accurately. So a bunch of things are going to go wrong over here. You are going to get the proportions of the bird accurately in part of the bird and inaccurately in part of the bird. Sometimes the roundness of objects throws us off. Sometimes lengths. And if you are keeping your book flat and looking at your reference image upright, then the what's it called? Not paradox. There is a something that happens to the I'm forgetting the word now. I don't know why.
Parallax.
Parallax, correct. Thank you. That will change it. So instead of resisting that occurrence, instead of saying, "Oh, this is looking bad, I need to erase it," welcome it. Because each of those instances where inaccuracies are going to occur is going to be a solution. Through that, you will know what you can do right. How's everyone doing? Do you need any help? So one tip when you're drawing the separation between the various colors on a bird is to draw these fence lines. So instead of drawing a line like this, which is, I guess you could say, perpendicular to the line of, okay, let me rephrase that. So we have this black patch in the center of the bird, and I could just draw a patch like this, going along, my line going along the edge of that patch. That's one way of making that. But instead of drawing this, especially in a place like this over here by the collar, here the line is parallel to how the feathers are placed. But over here, it is perpendicular. The feathers are like this, but the black feathers end over here, and the yellow feathers begin over there. They don't end like this. This is not the edge, the side edge. So the difference between being like this and being like this. So wherever you see that the line demarcating the two colors is at perpendicular to growth of the feathers, there make that line like this, like fences. So your illustration at the pencil stage also mimics the texture of the final image. So if you have a few lines that, especially in pencil, you don't really need to even erase them because they will get absorbed in the color of the that you're going to make. And secondly, that little bit of pencil texture will also add more depth or more meaning. Here again, I'll make these lines fence-like lines, even here, where the wing emerges. And with the remaining feathers, make the overlap distinct. Now here's one place where you can practice shading with texture. You can see that on the chest of this bird, there's a darker yellow. It's very light here, and here there's just a shadow. So you can practice making these wispy lines in such a way that they build one on top of the other and create a very smooth, soft texture and shadow at the same time. Okay, now I can show you how my bird is so flawed. The shoulder here is just not long enough or wide enough. And before I make any other adjustments, I should first color up the features on the bird like this. And this leg must actually come here. So once I have all this in, I know exactly where I might be going wrong. So this is the purpose of the sketch. How's everyone doing? Which one should we start painting?
The little yellow is very sweet, or the I don't know. Should we just try the big parrot?
Anything is fine. You guys decide. Okay, let's do the yellow one, this one, because I can show you some
Yeah.
shading techniques in this, which are really important.
Okay. You draw him again, right?
Yes, now we draw him again and draw him slightly larger this time, taking, I guess, some cues from the earlier sketch regarding
Yeah.
proportion and placement and whatnot.
Yeah, this one somehow got lots of wrong lines, which of course I've left them on. So
Yeah.
that, you know, I'll just show you if it's
Okay.
There's this one,
Hmm.
this one, and then this one, which had lots of
Yeah.
wrong.
No, so you've got it's mostly right.
But there was, see how many earlier, na? Because I
Yeah,
started and then I got the proportion wrong.
correct.
It's a
Yeah.
little bit.
Okay, now before we start drawing this, I just want to go over the proportions. So we all know what to watch out for. Let's just go through a study of proportions together. Let's start with the head. This is about the circle that the head can fit in. The beak, the eye, and that line of the cheek. It's not at half. Half would be somewhere here. So I'll draw this line and then I will draw another line to indicate what angle we need for the eye. At this half level, all the blues are just the objective grid. And based on that grid, where other proportions might come. Now from here, again, shifting back to red. If I were to make a line from the center to the end of the tail, center of the circle to the end of the tail, and then I were to divide it. This is the line. I divide it in maybe half over here. This is half. And this is a quarter from the bottom. So this gives us some idea. The line starts from the center of the circle, right? Then we have the structure coming all the way till here, maybe. So this tells us at what point and how far the body sticks out. And these are the various angles made by the rest of the body. The back of the bird comes almost straight and then dips inward. The tail is almost straight and dips outward. Then we have the leg at this angle 1 and from there at this angle 2. Okay, this should give us some good proportions to work with.
Could you post that on our
Yes,
the
yes.
proportions?
Okay. Now let's work with that. So when the beak is sticking out, just look at the proportion of the line sticking outward. It's maybe less than half of the radius also. When you draw this vertical line, when you draw this horizontal line, you can measure visually how much longer this line is in circles. Excuse me. So use the circle measurement and you'll see that this line is about almost the same length as the circle and a little more. So that's this, and then a little more where you have the base. Hmm. Okay, is it easier to draw this time?
Much easier.
Good. Okay, once you're satisfied with your proportions, you can remove the lines. Once you're comfortable with your drawing, go back to the original image and then refine it. Shall we start painting? All right. So when you're painting the bird, in the case of this bird, we have very little white spaces. So we don't really need to do an underlayer painting, but I'm going to show you how to make one any case. So in this case, we're going to create dimension by painting over, like an shadowing from the top. But you can also do the same thing, shadowing from the bottom. So in this case, I'm going to show you a little bit of a shadow or underlayer shadowing. I don't want you to paint this unless, of course, you're confident about it. Use a like a neutral gray mixing black, burnt umber, and either cobalt blue or ultramarine blue. So this gives you a neutral gray that is neither too black, too brown, or too blue. Using just a little bit of this gray, you can make a few washes in some places.
Aditi, can you please repeat the colors again?
Yes, they are burnt umber, black, and cobalt blue in this case. They're this gray. So just watch this. Don't do anything. I'll write the names over here. So we can put down a few colors with just a swish of our brush. Like for example, though the whiskers seem white over here, it'll help to give them some dimension. So laying down a few lines in just this gray. They're a little bit on the beaks. Maybe a little bit over here. On the highlight. Later on, it'll become black there. And also in some sections like under the wing, just at the tail. So I'm laying down this color, which is going to be then covered with a deeper color, but it gives us some sense of shadow. See, it's very light. I'm going to put that over here as well, where we'll later on then do gamboge. And I keep wiping my brush because I don't want a very concentrated color there. And that should be it. So the colors here are black, burnt umber, plus cobalt blue. Now I used a 10 number brush for this. So you have to be careful when you're using a 10 number brush because you don't want too much paint. It's almost a dry brush. Now using a thinner brush, I'm using the same gray. Again, not too much paint, not too much water. And I'm also painting the eye. I'm dodging around the reflection and making an underlayer over here. So these underlayers are very valuable to create a certain softness and dimension. Also, almost like a naturalness to the object. Then our colors don't remain too stark. All right, now for the gamboge. That's fairly simple. So we can do a combination of a clean lemon yellow and gamboge. You can use the palette for this, or you can also just do it directly. Palette will help those of you who are not too familiar. Just take some color out in the palette, check your consistency, and then work. So I'm taking a mixture of lemon yellow and gamboge, and I'm applying it somewhere in the middle, not at the top here. And wherever the color is dark, I'm applying it over there first. It can go into the black as well. And then I'm going to wipe my brush and extend it into the areas where it's lighter. I've not used water, I've just wiped it. So I'm taking the color and just spreading it out in the sections where it's slightly lighter. But I don't overdo it. Do it once and then just leave that be. Same thing over here. Slightly deeper here. So I'm adding a little more gamboge in this section. In this case now, just touch the water and I'm spreading this back and forth. I'll use the same color for the wings on top over here and the same over here. Something over here that I'm not comfortable with. So I'll paint that differently or separately. And a wash of the same color on the tail as well. Now, in the event you feel that your colors are too light or too dull, don't mess around till the previous color completely dries. Once that is done, then you can do whatever masti you want to. But while it is wet, don't try to add any more color. Now for the feet, which somehow the legs and feet of birds are just look so alien. Notice that there is a slight highlight along the left edge of the feet. I'm taking a raw umber in this case. And I'm painting only on the right sides of those objects, leaving a little bit of white space along the left edge, wherever I can. So whenever you're painting these, look for where you don't have wet paint and then paint over there. So keep dodging the areas. Now, ideally, we should do a second layer on the yellow, just so that we make the colors pop, because once we come to the reds, black, we won't be able to do anything about it. So this time round, and you could have done this even in the earlier round, paint a little inside the black section. And also dodge some of the sections that are light, like in this case over here. Make some over here. So as always, the rule remains paint something less or paint something else. And this time round, you can start adding some texture to the painting. Just make some flicks of the brush to give you a very subtle texture here. On the right side, we don't really need too much color. So at least I don't need color. So I'm just adding the texture. On the wing in the back, we can add texture with raw umber. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a very light wash first of raw umber, and then towards the bottom make this texture. I'm using the same raw umber to add some color on the little wing feathers also. But again, like we did for the feet, try to apply on only one side of the line. So it looks like there is a little bit of a shadow and a little bit of highlight in some places. Now, while this is drying, we can take one coat of black plus maybe even a blue, like a cobalt blue, to deepen the black a little bit. And put in a layer of this color in the internal part of the place where we want this black to go. So let me show you. This is the entire black space. I will start painting a little inside of that edge so that I fill up the space. I give it bulk. But also I will not miss the opportunity to create a texture along the edge as I go along. On the top of the head also, my application can be in lines, following the contour of the head. So if the color were to settle in a few puddles somewhere, it would most likely settle in puddles that are still telling us the same story. And now at this point, we start filling up in texture like feathers. So you can't obviously fill the whole section like that. That's why the internal section you can fill up with a much wider line, and then the external side of the same textures you can fill up with more lines intersecting each other. So this is also the first layer, so I've made it rather light. I don't want to make it too deep. I'm going to come back into this and make it deeper. Yeah, this internal section is black, flat, and the edges are a little more thoughtful. My edge is still a little further from here. Now, these lines over here are very important. The ones that will convince the eye that the rump, not the rump, the chest of the bird is turning. So even if you are making a black color there, make the lines turn like this. You may think that it won't be important, but somewhere the eye can discern the quality or the direction of the line. This is now essentially just a slightly darker gray from what we had before, right? So we can use this again to create extra shadows. Here again, you can see how I'm rounding the shadow and adding a shadow underneath this wing. Now we can use the same gray color, but an even lighter shade to give us the gray feathers in this section. So everywhere I'm just making the same kind of lines that I was asking you to make to fill up the color, just wispy lines. And use a thin brush for this. Once these layers are done, now we can really intensify. So I'm using the thinnest brush I have, which is I think a 0 or a number 1. And now I will carefully make all these features. You will notice that the black in our kit also remains a little gray after it dries. So layering with multiple shades or different colors makes sense. Now we've got a blue and a brown underneath this layer. So it should work. And now this time round, I can go into real detail to make the feathers. So your options are to leave some feathers like this, or to make some feathers in a detailed line like that with a very thin brush, or beyond a point, then you just start becoming a miniature painting artist and spend 60 hours in making every feather. And honestly, I love to do that. If only somebody would give me those 60 hours. So it's good to know that watercolor painting does not necessarily need those 60 hours. You are meant to create illustrations like this very briefly and maybe just with a few strokes here or there, create a semblance of the bird that you're trying to draw. After all, we are not trying to make a botanically accurate illustration for scientific purposes. So you need to know that that is a choice. It's not the only way to make bird illustrations.
Did we say zoologically or botanically? I was wondering. What is it?
Oh, I think all these science in illustrations are called
Botanical.
botanical, but
Huh.
I guess technically this would be zoological.
Just ideally.
Okay, I am now adding depth to the beak. This we have to do because otherwise the beak looks um, gray, no? So here, like I did the spreading of the color on the chest, I'm using the same technique by adding color to one edge of the beak, a little inside the outer edge. It's not on the outer edge. And then using the same color to spread across. So I will wipe the brush and I will just spread this with the dry brush and smoothen the edge out. And again, using very little paint, I will add depth to this corner once it dries up. Same thing over here for the lower beak as well. Now, if you look carefully, even in the blacks, there are different shades of black. So over here you have a little bit of yellow glinting through. That's probably because of the sunlight in the picture. Over here, it suddenly becomes a slightly blue glint. So we can make these variations also in watercolor. Just put a blue underlayer, a yellow underlayer, and you should be able to get that effect. And the more you build up, the darker it becomes. Use a combination of brushes. Use a fat brush for the larger areas like this. And while the color is wet, use a thinner brush to spread that about. And now you'll notice how the gray section over here underneath the eye will create the illusion of a little sunken shape there.
Now this fellow's eye is really sticking out. So with a little water, I'm going to pull in the gray from the neighborhood and make it look a little normal, not so dazed. Even the highlight is not fully white. I'm going to change that as well. And of course, add more black to the center and the top. Okay. Now for the feet and for the tail, we can use some of the same colors, like the raw umber from the bottom, coming down like this. And maybe dodge past the branch so that we can show it in the foreground. The feet can be a similar raw umber. And this time round, you can make the lines thinner and slightly further to the right to make them look more like wrinkles and shadows. Everywhere, look for places where you can add depth and dimension by adding shadows like this. I'm putting a shadow underneath this leg, and there's a highlight on the right, highlight on the left. So I'll make this dark section come through the center of the leg, as you can see in the reference image, and make this texture. If you feel the need to add more depth over here, then you can change, you can add more color through maybe adding a little bit of a burnt umber, or sorry, burnt sienna, and add a little color over here with a very thin brush. So you get some more depth. Okay, how are your birds looking? Oh, nice. Elaine, would you share the picture on the group so I can look at it
Yeah.
at close range? How nice.
The line, yeah, very nice.
Very nice. What are your comments on this, everyone?
I found it very difficult because I don't know, I'm happy doing with I mean, drawing and then using the micron pens.
Mm-hmm.
In this, initially the paint was all blotchy, then I had to dab it and pick the paint up, and then I tried to do with finer brushes, and then it started looking very hairy. So I guess I just need practice, but I found this really difficult.
So I'll tell you what, if you're using The moment you see that you have a big blob of paint on your paper, you can tell that in the first two strokes, how much volume of paint you are depositing on the paper. So instantly just wipe your brush on the rag and then use whatever paint you have put on the paper to spread that out.
Okay.
So there are lots of things if you are flexible enough to lots of things to adjust these few things that happen. And it's not wrong. It's perfectly fine. It's just a judgment and error in judgment. That's about it.
Also,
Uh,
for me, um, colors, when you say mix three colors, uh, I pick it, and then when I see your gray, my gray is like more bluer or more whatever else. So that's another thing that I need to work on. I mean, colors, I can't tell what makes that color. If you didn't tell me, I will not know what went.
That's normal. Yeah, don't beat yourself up about that. Most beginners don't know it. So again, the solution for that is you know all the colors in your palette, they all have names. You have those names, right? So you start becoming familiar with their nature. Some of the colors will be bright, some will be dull, some would look more mature, some would look very unnecessarily attractive, very jhadak. So you start noticing that each of them has a nuance, and all those characteristics can be used to our advantage. So when we want to brighten a color, we use either any of those three colors in one row: lemon yellow, gamboge, or your orange.
Orange.
So that will brighten up any warm color. If you want to brighten up a cool color, you will use cerulean blue because that is its internal nature. So over time, you will start noticing these things and you will start looking at what am I trying to achieve and how the colors that have been told in class are helping me achieve it. Which color works for what reason? So in time, you will start instinctively matching colors. And these are just colors. Remember, this is not like food where instead of dhania, if you go and put something else, you have to eat it and you're going to have a terrible indigestion or something like that. So if worst case scenario, your colors might be a little darker or a little lighter or in a different hue, but it could, if it's just a minor adjustment, it's like changing the lens and you know that you've done the right thing. So when you are struggling, this is the best time to pay attention to what you are doing instinctively. You may be doing some things instinctively that may be right, but they will be different from what I may be doing. So you think that you require a huge course correction, when in fact you could just instead of coming all the way around from the other side, you could just come this way and meet me in the place where I'm speaking about while you are still maintaining your instinct. So like for example, now you said that your gray was becoming too blue. Just observe what is happening with that blue. It may not be too wrong. It may not be making a big difference in this particular illustration, even if it is not gray. And you might come up with something that is equally interesting and maybe slightly different also, which also may look good. Okay, so just stay a little fluid about judgment. Okay,
Thank you.
all right. How about the others?
See, I found the coloring interesting, but the proportions of the bodies and the heads, I think that is where I need more practice because that the angles of the body, especially with the birds, sometimes the head is a little flat from here, but we make a circle, so it becomes circular. But when you see the picture, actually, it's a little flatter. I think I found that more difficult.
Right. That's the best way. But so the circle, because it's the easiest one to draw without I think objectively drawing a circle is easy because an oval can be anything. If six of us were to draw ovals, they would all look different. But six of us were to draw a circle, we can draw only one circle, right? So issues like these are something that you notice only after you have drawn a very circular head. Happens to all of us. How flat is a flat head? You wouldn't know until you've drawn that circular head and then you realize that maybe it had to be flattened. So at one point when I was making the pencil sketch, I too flattened the head of the bird a little bit because we see it as a round head. Also, we are trying to draw it on a circle, so we tend to make it round as well. In the grid that I have shared, notice that the head does not touch the circle. See it. It is a little lower, but the circle has just been arbitrarily placed over there. But when we start drawing, often we will follow the line of the circle because that's the closest shape that we can just lean on.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe what you can do, Anju, now, this is exactly what I was speaking about before, is now try and identify spots where you think things might have been different. And tomorrow, you might be able to see it even differently. Right now, we have a lot of information in our head. The subject is right in front of us, it's very fresh. But if you see this a few hours later, you will have a completely different learning from that as well.
Okay.
All right. Anyone else?
Shared pick in the group. This is what I did.
Okay.
The legs I feel are too short
Yeah, the direction is.
and the angle is.
So, Janita, were you drawing this looking at the picture on the screen or on your phone?
My phone is actually fixed higher and screen and that both.
So, how was your book? Was it flat or was it upright?
My book was down, but my phone was up.
Right. So, that is one big problem. So, if your reference image is on top, your book must be like this. You should be able to
Oh,
see the
okay.
lines in the same plane. What we see flat is very
Even the angle in which you place the phone also should be like right in front of you because mine is on the side.
Yes, it should be. So the shortest distance between looking at your image and your reference image keeps that information fresh. If you have to turn your head, you lose information and you see things differently also. And if you have to go up and down, what you see below suffers from that parallax. And what you see ahead, you see at a 90-degree angle, more or less. So you receive that information differently. So if you keep the book flat, or if you take a picture of your bird from the angle that you were seeing it, it might be closer to what you were seeing on screen. But the moment you look at it at 90 degrees perpendicular, it looks completely off. Then added to that, birds often are something that we've grown up with. So we have an idea of what birds are. As a child, you've probably drawn a bird with a letter number 2 and then draw some legs, or we draw some duck. So those imprinted ideas of birds always come to haunt us when we have to draw a bird as an adult. So right now your bird looks more like a fleshed out version of that, the duck that we drew in school. And this is just a memory of residual memory of something that your hand and your eye is used to. So it's a combination of two things. But can I see your sketches, the pencil sketches? Okay, see, the pencil sketches are different, no? There is the proportions on the pencil sketch are slightly better than the painted version. The parrot's head, okay, can change. The parrot's head is looking more like a vulture. But the pencil sketches, I think you've got them better.
The shape itself, I could not get, like, for it to look like a parrot.
I know. So now in this case, maybe I'm trying to figure this out. because everything is arranged around a circle, you can't really do that the normal straight line. Is it going towards 12 o'clock or 6 o'clock or so on and so forth? But you can try drawing a circle around the face, and you'll notice that the tip of the beak and the head has gone inward a little bit to join. And the head can be slightly flattened. So when you have drawn this beak, the head goes around like that. It doesn't go up and out. But draw it again. Keep this. Don't erase it. Keep it and draw another one.
Sorry, do you have the letter? for your
Yes,
speech?
I do. Just ask him if he can take it or if I need to do them.
Okay.
All right. Anything? Anything else? Okay. So next week, we will make some furry animals. If you have any suggestions, please send images. Anything from dogs, cats, bears, koalas, tigers, lions, anything is fine, but anything that requires fur. Okay, all right.
Aditi, can we make
Platypus.
small animals like a squirrel holding an acorn or a nut or something like that?
Yeah, if you have a reference image, do send it. I'd love to check it out. And then I can look for something similar also.
Okay.
Haven't done squirrels now.
No, I don't think we've done squirrels. Okay, chalo, I'll catch you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Anju, are you in
Thank-
Bombay?
No,
Okay,
no,
you're-
I'm in Goa.
you're in Goa. Sorry. No,
In fact, I'm very upset. Aditi.
Why?
When I was in Bombay, we were doing all the retreats in Goa, and now we are not doing anything in Goa.
The end of year, I'm doing it in Goa. Don't worry.
You're doing it in Kashmir, you're doing it in Mahabaleshwar.
I will
Okay.
I'll make it happen.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Very nice, Elaine. It's looking wonderful.
I messed up the tail a bit, but I'll try and repair it.
No, but it's looking good. Very nice. Okay, chalo. Bye, everyone.
Bye.